The visions came whether Neve wanted them or not. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to force back the images flooding her mind. Fire, screaming, wolves running through smoke-filled streets, a battle that hadn't happened yet, but would, if no one stopped it. Omega. The Pack Alpha's voice cut through her concentration. Are you listening? Neve dropped her hands and fixed her eyes on the floor. Yes, Alpha. Good. Then you understand your instructions. You're to serve at the Lycan King's feast tonight. Pour wine, clear plates, and above all... His hand gripped her chin, forcing her face up. Keep your mouth shut. If I hear so much as a whisper about your little episodes, you'll regret it. Episodes. That's what they called the gift that had cursed her since childhood. The ability to see fragments of the future, disasters before they struck, deaths before they happened, truths people desperately wanted to hide. Her mother had called it a blessing. Her pack had called it an abomination. They'd beaten the gift out of her, or tried to, but the visions never stopped. They just learned to hide. I understand, Alpha. Neve kept her voice flat, empty. The voice of an Omega who had learned that survival meant silence. See that you do. He released her chin with a shove that sent her stumbling. The Lycan King is visiting to discuss an alliance. If you ruin this for me, I'll sell you to the fighting pits. Am I clear? Yes, Alpha. She was dismissed with a wave. Neve retreated to the servants' quarters, her head still pounding with the aftershocks of the vision. Fire and screaming and wolves at war. Something terrible was coming. She just didn't know when or how or why, and she couldn't tell anyone, not without revealing what she was. The feast that night was grander than anything her pack had hosted before. The great hall blazed with candles. Music drifted from a corner where musicians played instruments she couldn't name. Nobles in fine clothes laughed and drank and pretended to be civilized, while their wolves lurked just beneath the surface. And at the head table, seated beside her Alpha, was the Lycan King. He was enormous. That was what everyone noticed first. The sheer size of him, 7 feet of muscle and barely contained power. His hair was dark, streaked with silver at the temples. His face hard and angular and utterly unreadable. He looked like a statue carved from stone and shadow. But his eyes, those amber eyes, swept the room with an intelligence that made Neve's skin prickle. She kept her head down as she circulated with a wine pitcher. Invisible. Forgettable. Just another servant in a hall full of them. She'd perfected this role over 23 years of survival. Keep quiet, keep small, keep hidden. The vision hit without warning. One moment she was reaching to refill a noble's goblet. The next, her mind exploded with images. The Lycan King falling, a blade in his back, blood spreading across white marble, a wolf with a twisted smile standing over his body. The pitcher slipped from her fingers. Wine splashed across the table, across the noble's fine clothes, across the floor in a spreading crimson stain. You clumsy fool! The noble surged to his feet, his hand raised to strike. Neve flinched back, bracing for the blow, but it never came. Enough? The word cut through the hall like a blade. Every head turned toward the high table, where the Lycan King had risen to his feet. His amber eyes were fixed on Neve with an intensity that made her stomach drop. She's just a servant, her Alpha said quickly, rising beside him. An Omega. I apologize for her clumsiness, Your Majesty. She'll be punished. She'll be nothing of the sort. The king descended from the high table, moving through the crowd with the easy grace of a predator who knew nothing could touch him. He stopped directly in front of Neve, so close she could smell him, pine and storm, and something ancient that made her wolf whimper. "Look at me," he said. She couldn't. Her body wouldn't cooperate. 23 years of training held her frozen, eyes fixed on the floor, hands trembling at her sides. "Little one." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "Look at me." She looked. His amber eyes burned into hers, not with anger or disgust or the cruel amusement she'd learned to expect from alphas, with something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "You saw something," he said. "Just now. What did you see?" Neve's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty." "Yes, you do." He took another step closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Your eyes went distant. Your hands started shaking before you dropped the picture, not after. You weren't clumsy. You were somewhere else." His head tilted, studying her like a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Where did you go?" "Nowhere. I lost my balance." "Don't lie to me." The words were calm, but absolute. "I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell your fear. Whatever you're hiding, I already know it exists. I'm simply asking you to tell me what it is." Neve's gaze darted to her alpha, who was watching with barely concealed fury. If she spoke, if she revealed what she was, he would destroy her. Sell her to the pits, just like he'd promised. Or worse. But the king was still watching her, waiting, and something in his eyes, something patient and fierce and strangely gentle, made her want to trust him. "I can't," she whispered. "Please. If I tell you, he'll do nothing." The king's voice hardened. "You're under my protection now. Whatever you say stays between us." "Your Majesty." Her alpha stepped forward, his smile strained. "This Omega is prone to fits, hallucinations. She's quite unstable. I really must insist." "You must insist on nothing." The king didn't even look at him. His eyes never left Neve's face. "I'm having a conversation. Interrupt me again, and this alliance discussion ends permanently." Silence fell over the hall. Neve could feel every eye on her, every noble holding their breath, every servant frozen in place. And still, the king waited. "I see things," she heard herself say. "Things that haven't happened yet. Visions of the future." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Her alpha's face went white with rage. But the Lycan king just smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from terrifying to something that made her chest ache. "What did you see tonight?" he asked. "You." Her voice cracked. "I saw someone kill you. A blade in your back. Blood on white marble." The murmur became a roar. Nobles shouted in alarm. Guards drew their weapons. Her alpha looked like he might faint or attack. But the king remained utterly still. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for telling me." "You believe me?" "I've lived for 400 years. I've learned to recognize truth when I hear it." His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "You have a gift, little one, a powerful one. Why do you hide it?" Neve's eyes stung. No one had ever called it a gift, not since her mother died. "Because they told me to," she whispered. "Because every time I spoke, someone hurt me for it. Because I learned that the only way to survive was to be small." Something shifted in the king's expression. Something fierce and protective and almost angry, but not at her. "Then they were fools," he said. All of them. Because you were never meant to be small, Neve. You were meant to be extraordinary. He knew her name. She didn't know how. She hadn't told him. But he knew. Come with me, he said, offering his hand. Let me take you somewhere safe. Somewhere you never have to hide again. She looked at his outstretched palm, at the hall full of nobles who were staring at her like she'd grown a second head, at her alpha, whose fury promised retribution if she stayed. She took his hand and let the king lead her out of the shadows. He didn't take her far, just to a private study off the main corridor, away from the chaos of the feast hall. Guards flanked the door outside, but inside it was just the two of them and the crackle of a fire someone had lit in anticipation of his arrival. Neve stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Kings didn't rescue Omega servants. They didn't call their curses gifts or look at them like they were something precious. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. "You're shaking," the king said. He'd moved to a side table and was pouring something from a decanter. Not wine, something darker. "When did you last eat?" "I don't remember." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." She watched him cross the room, watched him hold out the glass like an offering rather than a command. "What do you want from me?" "Right now? I want you to drink this. It's brandy. It'll help with the trembling." She took the glass, but didn't drink. "And after? After, I want you to tell me everything you saw in that vision. Every detail, no matter how small." He settled into a chair by the fire, leaving the other one empty for her. "Your alpha, former alpha, mentioned you've had these episodes before. How long have you been seeing the future?" "Since I was 7. The brandy burned her throat when she finally took a sip, but the warmth that followed was welcome. "My mother had the gift too. She taught me to understand what I was seeing, how to interpret the symbols and images. She said our bloodline had carried the sight for generations." "Had?" "She died when I was 12. A fever." Neve's grip tightened on the glass. "After that, there was no one to protect me. The pack decided my visions were dangerous, unnatural. They said I was possessed, that I needed to be cured." "Cured how?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. The scars on her back spoke for themselves, though he couldn't see them beneath her servant's dress. The king's expression darkened. "They hurt you. For telling the truth. They hurt me for being different, for seeing things they didn't want seen." She finally sank into the empty chair, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "I learned to hide it, to pretend the visions weren't happening, but I couldn't stop them. I've never been able to stop them." "Why would you want to?" The question caught her off guard. "Because they bring nothing but pain. Every time I speak, someone suffers for it. Either me or—" She stopped, swallowed. "I warned a girl once, told her I'd seen her mate with another woman. She confronted him, and he killed her for it, beat her until she stopped breathing." Her voice cracked. "I thought I was helping. I thought if she knew she could protect herself. Instead, I got her killed." "You didn't kill her. Her mate did." "Because of what I told her?" "Because he was a murderer." The king leaned forward, his amber eyes intense. "You gave her information. What she did with it was her choice. What he did was his crime. You don't carry the blame for either." "It doesn't feel that way." "I know." Something softened in his expression. "I've lived 400 years. I've made decisions that cost lives, sometimes hundreds of them. I've sent soldiers to die in battles I ordered. I've executed men who might have been redeemable, And every single one of those deaths lives in my memory, whispering that I should have done something different. He paused. But guilt doesn't mean responsibility. Sometimes terrible things happen, despite our best intentions. That doesn't make us monsters. It makes us witnesses. Neve stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever suggested that her gift might be something other than a curse, that her pain might be something other than punishment. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. "Because you deserve kindness." He said it simply, without hesitation. "And because you're my mate." The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. "That's impossible," Neve whispered. "Is it?" His amber eyes held hers. "I felt the bond snap into place the moment you looked at me. My wolf has been howling your name since you lifted your eyes from the floor. That's why I knew who you were before you told me. That's why I can't seem to look away. Mates are supposed to be—" She struggled for words. "Equal. Matched. I'm an Omega with a curse that gets people killed. You're the Lycan king." "I'm aware of the disparity." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fate doesn't seem to care about rank. It pairs souls, not titles." "I don't believe in fate." "You see the future, but you don't believe in fate." "I see possibilities, paths that might unfold if nothing changes." She set down the brandy glass, her hands steadier now. "The future isn't fixed. It can be altered. That's why I told you about the assassination, because knowing might help you prevent it." "And you wanted to prevent it? Even though you'd never met me?" "I don't want anyone to die, not even kings I don't know." She met his gaze. "Especially not kings who look at me like I'm worth something." The firelight caught his expression, surprise and warmth, and something that looked almost like wonder. For a moment, he didn't look like the fearsome Lycan king. He looked like a man who'd been handed an unexpected gift. "Tell me about the vision," he said quietly. "Everything you remember." So she told him. The white marble floor, not the Pack's great hall, somewhere else. The blade, curved and ceremonial, driven between his shoulder blades. The wolf, standing over him, face twisted with triumph. The blood spreading in a pool that reflected torchlight. "Did you recognize the attacker?" the king asked when she finished. "No, but—" She hesitated. "He felt familiar. Not someone I know, but someone connected to you. Someone close. A member of my court. Maybe. Or your pack. Someone who has access to wherever that white marble room is." The king was silent for a long moment. Then he rose and crossed to the door, speaking quietly to one of the guards outside. When he returned, his expression was carefully neutral. "My throne room has white marble floors," he said, "installed by my father 200 years ago. Very few people outside my inner circle would know that." "Then the assassin is someone in your inner circle." "It would appear so." He resumed his seat, but his posture had changed, coiled now, alert. "Thank you, Neve. You may have just saved my life." "The vision might not come true, if you're careful." "I intend to be very careful." His amber eyes found hers again. "Starting with you." "Me?" "You're coming back to my kingdom with me. Tonight." Neve's heart stuttered. "I can't just—" "You can. Your former alpha lost any claim to you the moment I declared you under my protection." His voice softened. "I won't force you. If you truly want to stay here, with people who hurt you for being extraordinary, I'll respect that choice. But I'm offering you something better. A place where your gift is valued." a home where you never have to hide. And if the visions show you something you don't want to see, something about yourself, then I'll deal with it. The truth doesn't frighten me, Neve. Lies frighten me. Ignorance frightens me. But the truth? He shook his head. The truth is a weapon, and I'd rather have it in my arsenal than my enemy's. She should refuse, should return to her pack and her silence, and the safety of being small, should remember that powerful men always wanted something in return. But his eyes held nothing but honesty. His voice held nothing but warmth. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she'd thought was dead, something stirred to life. One condition, she said. Name it. If I come with you, I come as myself, not as a weapon or a tool, as a person, with choices. The king smiled. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. That's all I've ever wanted, he said, for you to have choices. He offered his hand again. This time, when she took it, she didn't feel like she was being rescued. She felt like she was finally being seen. His name was Ronan. She learned it on the journey to his kingdom, whispered by the guards who flanked their carriage, spoken with reverence by the servants who greeted them at every way station. King Ronan, the Wolf of the North, the deathless king who had ruled for 4 centuries and buried every enemy who dared challenge him. And he looked at Neve like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. 2 weeks into her new life, she was still waiting for the dream to shatter. The castle he'd brought her to was nothing like the cramped pack house she'd grown up in. Her chambers alone were larger than the entire servants' quarters where she'd spent 23 years. There were books, shelves of them, more than she could read in a lifetime. There were clothes that fit, made of fabric soft enough to make her weep. There was food, 3 meals a day, served on actual plates instead of scraps thrown into a communal bowl. And there was Ronan. Always Ronan, checking on her every morning, dining with her every evening, asking questions about her gift, her past, her thoughts, listening to her answers like they mattered. It was disorienting, terrifying, like standing on ground that might crumble at any moment. The vision came on the 15th night. She was in the library, reading by firelight, a luxury she still couldn't quite believe she was allowed, when the images slammed into her without warning. Not the assassination this time. Something else. Something worse. Fire. The same fire she'd seen before her former Alpha's feast. But now she could see more. A village burning, children screaming, wolves in battle formation, tearing through streets while buildings collapsed around them. And at the center of it all, a banner she recognized, the crimson wolf of her former pack. They were planning an attack, not on the Lycan king's territory, but on a village at the border. Innocent people, families, children. And she could see it happening, could see the flames and the blood and the bodies piling in the streets. The book fell from her hands. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except drown in images of death and destruction that hadn't happened yet but would, soon, unless… Neve. Ronan's voice cut through the chaos. She hadn't heard him enter, but suddenly he was there, kneeling before her chair, his hands hovering near her shoulders without quite touching. Neve, look at me. Come back. She tried to focus on his face, on his amber eyes, on the solid reality of him. But the vision kept pulling at her, showing her horrors she couldn't unsee. I can't. Her voice came out strangled. There's so much blood. The children, they're burning and I can't. You're here. You're safe. Whatever you're seeing isn't happening yet. His hands finally made contact, gripping her shoulders firmly enough to ground her. Breathe with me. In and out. Follow my rhythm. She tried, failed, tried again. Slowly, agonizingly, the vision began to release its grip. The library came back into focus. The fire in the hearth, the books on their shelves, Ronan's face inches from hers. There you are. His voice was soft, relieved. Stay with me. They're going to attack. The words tumbled out in a rush. My former pack. They're planning to raid a border village. I saw it. The fires, the screaming, the children. Her voice broke. So many children, Ronan. They're going to kill them all. His expression hardened, but his hands remained gentle on her shoulders. When? I don't know. Soon. The crops in the vision were ready for harvest, so autumn. A few weeks, maybe. Which village? I didn't see the name, but there was a river, a bridge made of white stone, and hills, green hills with sheep grazing. Millbrook. Ronan's jaw tightened. A farming village on the eastern border. 300 people, mostly families. He released her shoulders and stood, pacing to the window. Why would your former pack attack a village? They're not large enough for territorial expansion. Resources. They've been struggling since... She stopped, swallowed. Since I was a child, the Alpha gambles, badly. And when the debts pile up, he takes what he needs from whoever can't fight back. And you've known this? All along? I've seen it. Glimpses. Fragments. Shame crept into her voice. I never said anything because they would have hurt you for speaking. He turned back to face her, and there was no judgment in his expression, only understanding. You were a child, Neve, an Omega with no power and no protection. You did what you had to do to survive. Children are going to die because I stayed silent. Children are going to live because you spoke now. He crossed back to her, kneeling again so they were eye to eye. You gave me warning. That's more than anyone else could have done. Now I can send soldiers. I can evacuate the village. I can make sure your former Alpha never hurts anyone again. You'd do that? Go to war for a village of farmers? I'd do far more than that. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Those people are under my protection. Their lives matter. And so does yours. His amber eyes burned into hers. You matter, Neve. Not because of what you can see or what you can tell me, because of who you are. Her eyes stung. You don't know who I am. I know you spent 23 years being punished for a gift you never asked for. I know you stayed silent to survive and hated yourself for it every day. I know you carry guilt for deaths you didn't cause and pain you couldn't prevent. His forehead came to rest against hers. And I know that despite all of it, despite everything they did to break you, you still chose to speak. You still chose to save people you've never met. That takes more courage than most warriors ever show. I'm not brave. I'm terrified all the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He pulled back just enough to look at her. You are the bravest person I've ever met, Neve. And you were never meant to be small. You were meant to shine. Something cracked open in her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully over years of pain and silence, crumbling under the weight of his words. I've never... She had to stop. Start again. No one has ever looked at me the way you do, like I'm worth something. Like my gift is actually a gift and not a curse. Because the people who raised you were blind. They saw something they couldn't control, and instead of marveling at it, they tried to destroy it. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. You were treasure, and they treated you like trash. That was their failure, not yours. What if I see something about you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something you don't want to know? Something terrible? Then you'll tell me, and I'll deal with it. He said it without hesitation. I told you before. The truth doesn't frighten me. Not even the truth about myself. Everyone has things they want to hide. Everyone has things they're ashamed of. That doesn't mean they should stay hidden. His eyes held hers. I've done terrible things, Neve. I've made choices that haunt me. If you see them in your visions, I won't blame you for it. I'll just be grateful that someone finally knows the full truth of who I am. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the gift he was offering, the chance to be fully known without fear of rejection. I'm falling for you, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Ronan's breath caught. For a moment, he looked younger than she'd ever seen him. Not a 400-year-old king, but a man confronting something he'd stopped hoping for. I've already fallen, he said quietly. The moment you looked at me in that hall, I knew. You were it. The end of 4 centuries of waiting. His hand slid from her jaw to cup the back of her neck. I don't expect you to feel the same. Not yet. Not until you're ready. But I want you to know that whatever you need, whatever pace you require, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. She should pull away, should protect herself from the hope blooming in her chest, should remember that powerful men made promises they couldn't keep. But his hand was warm on her neck. His eyes held nothing but truth. And for the first time in her life, she didn't want to be small. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a claim. But Ronan answered it with everything he had, his free hand coming up to cradle her face, his mouth moving against hers with a tenderness that made her want to weep. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling. I'm still terrified, she admitted. So am I. He pressed his forehead to hers again. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. She laughed, a wet, shaky sound that was half sob. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the most foolish. Probably both. He smiled against her lips. I've been told I'm not very sensible when it comes to you. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. And when Neve finally pulled back to look at him, she didn't see a king or a monster or a man to be feared. She saw home. Terrifying, impossible, absolutely undeniable home. The assassination attempt came 3 days later. Neve was in the throne room, the white marble throne room she'd seen in her very first vision, watching Ronan hear petitions from his subjects. It had become a habit over the past weeks, sitting in the gallery above while he dispensed justice and settled disputes. She liked watching him work, liked seeing the way he listened to everyone equally, noble and commoner alike. She didn't see the assassin until it was almost too late. The man had come in with a group of merchants seeking trade licenses. He'd waited patiently in line, dressed in the same simple clothes as everyone else, his face carefully neutral. But when he reached the front, when Ronan leaned forward to hear his petition, something shifted in his expression. Recognition slammed into Neve like a physical blow. The twisted smile, the ceremonial blade hidden beneath his cloak, the trajectory of his arm as he lunged forward. Ronan! Her scream tore through the throne room. Ronan reacted on instinct, twisting sideways, but not fast enough. The blade caught him in the shoulder instead of the back. Painful, but not fatal. Not the killing blow she'd foreseen. Guards swarmed the assassin, The throne room erupted into chaos, and Neve was running, shoving through the crowd, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might shatter. Ronan dash dash. I'm fine. He was on his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, his amber eyes scanning the room for additional threats. It's a flesh wound. The blade missed anything vital. Because you moved. Because I... Her voice cracked. The vision. I changed it. I actually changed it. You saved my life. He pulled her close with his uninjured arm, pressing his forehead to hers. Again. The guards had subdued the assassin, a man she didn't recognize, his face contorted with rage as they dragged him away. But something about him tugged at her memory, something familiar in the set of his jaw, the color of his eyes. Who is he? She asked. Ronan's expression darkened. Lord Aldrich, my cousin, third in line for the throne. Your cousin tried to kill you? It appears so. His jaw tightened. He's been bitter since I took the crown. Thought his father should have been king instead of mine. I suppose he finally decided to do something about it. I saw him, in my first vision, but I didn't recognize him because I'd never seen him before. Neve's hands were shaking. If I'd known sooner, if I could have identified him. You saw enough. You gave me warning. Ronan cupped her face with his good hand. The vision showed me dying. Instead, I'm standing here with a scratch on my shoulder. That's because of you, Neve. Your gift saved me. My gift almost wasn't enough. But it was. That's what matters. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Stop blaming yourself for things that didn't happen. The healers arrived then, insisting on examining his wound. Neve stood back and watched them work, her mind racing. She'd changed the future. She'd actually changed it. All those years of believing her visions were curses, harbingers of inevitable doom. And now she knew the truth. The future could be altered. Her gift wasn't just for seeing disaster. It was for preventing it. The realization cracked something open in her chest. Something that had been locked away since she was 7 years old, since the first vision came and brought nothing but pain. She wasn't cursed. She was powerful. And for the first time in her life, she believed it. It was late that night when Ronan came to her chambers. His shoulder was bandaged, his arm in a sling, but he moved with the same predatory grace as always. You should be resting, Neve said. I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about you. He crossed to where she stood by the window, his amber eyes searching her face. You've been quiet since the attack. Are you all right? I've been thinking. About what I want. She turned to face him fully. I've spent my whole life hiding, shrinking, making myself small so no one would notice me, so no one would hurt me for what I could see. But today, she took a breath. Today, I screamed your name in front of your entire court. I didn't think about consequences or punishment or what anyone would do to me. I just acted. And you saved my life. I stopped being small. Her voice trembled. For the first time ever, I stopped being small. And it felt... She struggled for words. It felt like becoming myself. Ronan's expression softened. You were always yourself, Neve. You just didn't have anywhere safe to show it. I have somewhere now. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I have you. You do. His good hand came up to cup her face. You have me. For as long as you want me. What if I want you forever? His breath caught. Neve, I'm not scared anymore. Not of you, not of this, not of what I feel. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it pound beneath her palm. I love you, Ronan. I love the way you look at me like I matter. I love the way you listen when I speak. I love that you see my gift as a gift instead of a curse. I love... Her voice cracked. I love that you make me want to be more than I ever thought I could be. You were always more. His voice was rough. The rest of the world was just too blind to see it. Then claim me. The words came out steady, sure. Make me yours. I'm done hiding, done shrinking, done being small. I want to be extraordinary. And I want to be extraordinary with you. The claiming mark is permanent. Once I bite you, I know what it means. She tilted her head back, exposing her throat. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Not because I have to, not because you saved me, but because when I look at the future now, you're in every version of it. Every path leads back to you. Ronan made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half groan, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like their first. This was fire and desperation, and 400 years of loneliness finally finding its end. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was light and he'd been living in darkness, like she was everything he'd ever wanted, and he couldn't quite believe she was real. When his lips finally moved to her throat, Neve didn't flinch. She tilted her head back further, giving him access, offering him everything she had. Mine, he breathed against her pulse point. Yours, she agreed. Always. The bite was sharp and bright, and over in an instant. But the bond that followed, the rush of warmth spreading through her veins, the sudden awareness of him in her blood and her bones, that was eternal. She could feel him now, his love, burning steady and fierce, his relief, overwhelming after centuries of waiting, his joy, so intense it made her want to weep, and underneath it all, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. I love you, Ronan said against her skin. I've loved you since the moment you lifted your eyes and looked at me like I was the most terrifying thing you'd ever seen. Neve laughed, a real laugh, bright and startled and completely free. You were terrifying. And now? Now you're home. She pulled back to look at him, at those amber eyes that had changed everything. You're my home, Ronan, and I'm never going to hide from you again. He kissed her again, softer this time, and she felt his smile against her lips. She'd been so afraid of her gift, so certain it would only ever bring pain. But it had brought her here, to this moment, to this man, to a future she'd never dared to imagine. She wasn't small anymore. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was exactly who she was always meant to be. The coronation took place on the winter solstice, when the longest night gave way to returning light. Neve stood before the great hall, the same white marble throne room where she'd screamed Ronan's name and changed the future, wearing a gown of midnight blue embroidered with silver stars. A crown rested on her head, delicate silver woven with moonstones that caught the torchlight like captured dreams. The claiming mark on her neck was visible to everyone. She'd refused to cover it. Let them see, she'd told Ronan. Let them know exactly what I am. And what she was, it turned out, was a queen. You're trembling, Ronan murmured, standing beside her at the front of the hall. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a thin scar that he wore like a badge of honor. I'm not used to people looking at me. They're not just looking, they're seeing. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. the way I saw you from the beginning? The ceremony was brief. Lycan traditions didn't require elaborate rituals, just the acknowledgement of the bond, the presentation of the crown, the declaration before witnesses. But when Ronan placed that crown on her head, Neve felt the weight of it settle into her bones. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't small. She was standing in front of an entire kingdom, claiming her place beside the man who had seen her worth when everyone else saw only a curse. "My queen," Ronan said, loud enough for the hall to hear. "My mate. My heart." The crowd erupted into cheers. Nobles who had once dismissed her as an unstable Omega now bowed their heads in respect. Guards who had watched her with suspicion now looked at her with something like awe. And at the back of the hall, in chains, stood her former alpha. Ronan had captured him 3 weeks ago, when the attack on Millbrook failed spectacularly. The king's soldiers had been waiting when the raiders arrived. The village had been evacuated. The battle lasted less than an hour before the pack surrendered. Neve's vision had saved 300 lives. And now the man who had beaten her for having that vision was about to face judgment. "Bring him forward," Ronan commanded. The guards dragged her former alpha to the base of the dais. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow, stripped of the power that had made him so terrifying. His fine clothes were gone, replaced by prisoners' rags. His arrogant sneer had crumbled into something desperate and afraid. "Alpha Garrett," Ronan said, his voice cold. "You stand accused of raiding my territory, planning the murder of innocents and the systematic abuse of pack members under your protection. How do you plead?" "This is madness." Garrett's voice cracked. "You can't trust her visions. She's unstable. She's been lying since she was a child. She saved my life with those visions. She saved an entire village." Ronan's amber eyes burned with barely contained fury. "The only lies in this room are the ones you told her for 23 years. She's an Omega, a nothing. You can't seriously be taking her word over mine." "I'm taking the word of my queen." Ronan's voice dropped to a growl. "And you will address her with the respect she deserves, or I'll remove your tongue before I remove your head." Garrett went pale. His eyes darted to Neve, searching for the frightened girl he'd controlled for so long. But she wasn't there anymore. "You told me I was cursed," Neve said, her voice steady. "You told me my gift was an abomination. You beat me when I spoke the truth and punished me for seeing things you didn't want seen." She stepped forward, standing at the edge of the dais, looking down at the man who had haunted her nightmares. "But you were wrong. About all of it. I'm not cursed. I'm not broken. I'm not small." "Neve, please!" His voice turned pleading. "I was trying to protect you. The pack didn't understand. You were trying to control me because you knew what I could do, and it terrified you." She tilted her head, studying him the way she might study a spider she'd found under a rock. "I saw what you were planning, you know. Not just the raid on Millbrook. I saw all of it. The gambling debts, the stolen goods, the other villages you've destroyed over the years. I saw the bodies you left behind." His face went grey. "You can't prove—" "I don't have to prove anything. I saw it." She smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "That's the thing about my gift. It doesn't just show me the future. Sometimes it shows me the past. All those secrets you thought were buried, I know them all." For the first time in her life, Neve watched her former alpha truly afraid. Not performing fear, not calculating his next move, genuinely, desperately terrified of the woman standing above him. It felt like justice. "Your execution will take place at dawn," Ronan said. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your soul. The guards dragged Garrett away. His screams echoed through the marble halls, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Neve stood in the silence that followed, waiting for guilt or grief or some lingering loyalty to the pack that had raised her. But all she felt was relief. Are you all right? Ronan asked quietly. Better than all right. She turned to face him, to face the crowd, to face the future she'd once been too afraid to see. I'm free. 2 years later, Neve sat in the castle gardens with a daughter in her arms. The child had her father's amber eyes and her mother's dark hair. She was barely a year old, but already the servants whispered about the way she seemed to know things, the way she'd cry before storms came, the way she'd smile at people seconds before they entered a room. The gift had passed on, and this time it would be treasured. She's going to be extraordinary, Ronan said, settling onto the bench beside them. His arm came around Neve's shoulders, pulling her close. Just like her mother. She's going to be loved. Neve pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. That's what matters. She's going to grow up knowing her gift is a blessing, not a curse. She's going to grow up knowing she was never meant to be small. Neve smiled. The claiming mark on her neck pulsed with warmth, the constant reminder that she was loved, that she belonged, that she had found her place in a world that had once tried to break her. She thought about the girl she'd been, the Omega who'd hidden her visions, who'd flinched at every raised hand, who'd learned to make herself invisible because visibility meant pain. That girl felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. I had a vision last night, she said. Ronan's arm tightened around her. Good or bad? Good. She leaned into his warmth, watching their daughter grab at sunbeams with tiny, determined fingers. I saw us, old and grey, surrounded by grandchildren, still sitting in this same garden. Her voice softened. Still happy, still together. That's the future you want? That's the future I'm choosing. She turned to look at him, at those amber eyes that had seen her true self from the very beginning. Every day I choose you. Every path leads back to you. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. She'd spent 23 years hiding her gift, believing she was cursed, learning to be small because small meant safe. But safe had never meant happy, and small had never meant whole. Now she was a queen, a mate, a mother. She was loved and valued, and free to be exactly who she was always meant to be. She was extraordinary, and she was never going to hide again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale of fated mates, fierce kings, and the women who capture their hearts. Until next time.